Hello admirals and welcome back to my channel where I talk to you about Battlefleet Gothic, the space fleet game based in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. In this video I'm going to talk to you about ships and ramming attacks. This was voted by you admirals as being the one you wanted to see first. Very close with assault boats and hit and run, but we're going to do this one first. So it's a 2D game based in a 3D universe with space. So how does actually a ship charging forward hit another ship? How does that all get resolved? So in the rules, you can ram other ships. So let's check out what that all means. So ramming speed. What is ramming speed? Yes, you can actually ram other ships and bash them in this game, which is incredibly weird when you're thinking about such a vast space that space is. But you know, we're on a 2D plane rather than 3D here, so there's a few eccentricities in it that you've got to take into consideration. But to be able to actually do any ramming to start with, you actually have to pass one of the 6 orders. You actually originally have to pass an all-ahead full order. So if you plan to ram with a ship, you need to pass an all-ahead full order first. And once you've done that, that's your normal leadership. Once you've did that, then you can proceed to the actual ramming speed process. So once you've passed this, to be able to ram the ship, you must move into base-to-base contact with the target. You have to select your target first, and the reason why that's important is because you can fail, and you can actually miss your target, but I'll get to that in a second. But if you come into contact as part of this, that's when you actually you're doing the ram. Now, just before I show you exactly kind of what happens is, any ship can initiate ramming speed, basically. So you just pass the ship leader test, but an escort can do ramming, battleships can, but depending on what class of ship this is and what their intended target is, will depend then the number of dice they need to roll to pass the leadership to it to make sure that they actually indeed hit the target. So you do an extra leadership roll after this, and I'll go into that in a second and what you need to roll, but it is dependent upon the class that is actually doing the actual ramming itself and what they're aiming to hit. So you passed your all-ahead full, and your intended target is selected, and you know what your intended target is. You then need to pass a leadership test to see if your captain skillfully maneuvers the actual ship to actually be able to hit this ship. This is kind of simulating that, you know, this is a huge vast space and you've got to get your right angles right with inertia and all that side to actually hit your opposing ship. So you'd need to pass another leadership test to be able to do the actual ram. Now, if you pass that leadership test, you would roll your 4d6 plus your movement and move forward. So I've got a few dice here, right? A few dice. So in this instance, let's just go there. So that's what I've rolled for my all-ahead ship orders. So I've got 12, 15, 20. So these guys can move 20, so I would go 40 centimeters this way, which means that I would come into contact base to base with this ship, which means that I will do the ramming action. Then once that ramming action is concluded, which I'll go into in a second, you proceed to do the full movement. So if you fail the initial leadership test, you still go all the way, and you just don't do the actual ramming. So you pass this, you roll the dice, you find out how far you're going, and then you try and pass your leadership test to actually do the ramming action. If you pass that, then all ahead full and you hit, and then you keep on going. If you don't pass that leadership, you do the all ahead full and you keep going, but you miss your target. So that leadership roll, like I said earlier, depends on the actual ship class you're going for. So obviously it's easier for an escort to ram a battleship than the other way around. So the leadership test is taken on a 3d6 if the target vessel is of a smaller type, or small class I should say, than the ramming one. But if the target vessel is larger, or a bigger class, than the ramming one, then the leadership test is rolled on 1d6. So for example, this cruiser going up against another cruiser rolls 2d6 on their leadership. If they're trying to hit the battleship, then they're rolling 1d6. But if they're trying to hit the escort, they're rolling on the leadership to 3d6 because you're trying to hit something smaller. So you've done your all ahead full, you know how far you're going with your 4d6, and you've passed your leadership to hit the opponent and you're going. So you know you're going to pass from base to base and then keep going. But what actually then happens? So if you hit, you roll 1d6 for each point of its starting damage capacity, not the damage it has left. So, and then you roll that start. So for this one, this is a cruiser. This Gothic class cruiser has 8 damage starting capacity. And you roll 1d6 for every one of them. So you're rolling 8d6 against this ship. And to hit it, as part of the ramming, any of those dice needs to hit their armor roll. So for example, I'll do 4 here. So I've got 1 there. Let's do another couple, right? Oh, I got a few there. So that's 4 more hits. And then I'd have 2 more. And no, they missed, right? So I would have caused 4 points of damage on that ship then by rolling that. Now, the ramming ship can also take damage. Now, the ship that's actually being rammed can also do damage back to this ship. And when it is in this angle, is dependent on its angle that it's being hit by. If it's within its side arc like this, then it's equal to, you roll the number of dice equal to half its starting damage. So again, this is a cruiser with 8 hit points. It would roll 4d6 during this to attack back. So I'd roll 4d6 and you're hitting on the armor value. So I would need a 6 to do damage this because the Imperials have an armor 6 prow. So I didn't do any damage back. Now, if you're doing a head-on collision, which is harder to do, this ship actually uses its full starting damage the same as this one. So you'd roll 8 dice for this one if it's face-to-face like that. So if you're the person ramming another ship, you try and always aim for that sort of crossing the T kind of motion you're kind of aiming for. Just want to point out a couple of sort of weird sort of interactions essentially that can occur. The damage caused by ramming is not deflected by shields, so that's one aspect to it. Now, what if there's other ships in the way? Okay, now this is a 2D game trying to represent 3D, so these ships might not be in this exact alignment, right? So when you're trying to attempt to ram, you can only ram one ship. And you need to elect that ship that you're aiming for. You don't need to pass any leaderships or anything to aim for someone further away in ramming, but you do need to select which ship you're going for because you can't do both. Now, so you still go all through the process of trying to pass this and pass your other leadership to do it, all that sort of stuff. But now, critically, if you roll the 4d6. And it doesn't make it to your ship over here, the ramming actually fails. And you don't actually end up ramming this ship instead. So that's why you have to, it's important to elect the target of the actual ram action. And you should try and do the leadership. Actually, you have to do the leadership to elect to ram a ship before you roll the 4d6. So you got to select your target and all that sort of stuff before you roll to see actually how far you're going. That's actually quite critical. So you also, when you do this, you resolve the damage and any potential critical hits occurred immediately when you do ramming. And if a ship actually ends up being destroyed or explodes, then you resolve that then and there. And if, say, for example, I ram this ship and this one explodes, both ships, this ship would be caught in that. It's an automatic that because it's actually part of the actual explosion. So if you cause an exploding ship, the ship that's actually doing the ramming action will have to take some potential hits. Again, you roll for that against the armor, but it potentially could get hit by the explosion. Now, something that's unique to the Imperial fleet is this, a power ram. And all Imperial ships can actually, Imperial Navy, can put a power ram on their capital ships. anything with a six armor prow essentially in the Imperial fleet can do it. It costs 5 points, but you can't have one with a Nova cannon, so you can't have that. But essentially, ships that are equipped with a power ram for all those 4 points cause 1 automatic hit during a successful ram. So you have to still successfully pass the leadership test to do the ramming action, but if you do and you make it in to base contact, your power ram will do 1 auto hit, and that's before you do any of the other hits to actually cause any damage. So to summarize, you need to pass a leadership test for all ahead full. You need to pick your target. You need to pass a leadership test to do your ramming action. Then you roll your 4d6, or 2d6 if you're orcs, to do your all ahead full. You have to move your maximum distance, but the ramming is successful if you pass the leadership test and you come into base-to-base contact. And for the actual summary of that, the ramming ship, you roll d6 equal to the number of starting damage. The actual ship that's being rammed, roll a number of d6 equal to half its starting damage, unless it's facing forward, and then you roll the number of d6 dice equal to its starting damage if it's face on. So a few sort of thoughts on the tactics of ramming. I think it's something that is really, really useful in 2 kind of extremes, in that you don't want to do it all the time. It's a bit of a Hail Mary. It's a bit of a hope for the best in many situations. However, if you have a pretty damaged ship that you don't think you're going to be able to fade away or anything like that, or you still want to keep it in the fight, then say this has only got like 1 hit point left and these ships are pretty healthy, then ramming is a better option in many respects than trying to bring the Lancers to bear, because you have its starting damage, 8 hits trying to go into it. Whereas if it's crippled, it's down to 2, maybe it's braced, you're only rolling 1 lance, for example. So you're maximizing the amount of dice, potentially. So it's a really good, useful technique if you want to just launch a ship in and it's heavily damaged, and then you can put some hurt on these ships. Additionally, by getting it in there, it may do some damage, maybe cripple the opposition ship, maybe, but it's also potentially then in and amongst your enemy fleet that with only 1 hit point then could explode itself. Or it could explode as part of that ramming action and do more damage to your enemy fleet. So it's a little bit of a fire ship in many respects. You could potentially do it that way. Additionally, if you don't think, on the opposite side to that, you may have a particularly good, healthy ship here that you can't bring to arc, you can't get, your weapons to bear. So potentially, this is all done as well, I should say, in the movement phase. So you potentially could ram a ship, end up in a good arc firing position. So you've rammed a ship, and you're kind of sitting there, say. You may actually then be able to fire some of your lances because you become in arc. So it can potentially be another way of getting a ship into arc as well as a potential opportunity, or getting in amongst your enemy fleet. Power rams are pretty cool. An auto hit is always useful and worth considering for 5 points if you've got a spare couple of 5 points floating around in your Imperial fleet. So there are probably 2 other sort of points I'd like to make. Can the ship that's being hit brace for impact? And yes, it can attempt to brace. And the other one, can you do a ramming action and then board? And the answer is yes, you can, but it's incredibly difficult and would require amazing luck to do. So you would need to pass your all ahead full, select your target, pass the leadership test to do the ramming, then roll 4d6 and get exactly what you need, including your movement, to end up in base-to-base contact with another ship. So you have to be able to hit that ship and then have the exact number of movement in your dice to be in base-to-base contact with this ship. Otherwise, it's just going to sail past it. So it can be done. it would just require an amazing amount of precision and luck with the rolling of the dice, essentially. There you go, Admirals. That's sort of a basic rundown of ramming in BFG. Ships hitting other ships. I think it's a good tactic to use personally when you can't get the firing arcs you want. So if a ship, you're not going to be able to get them on their port or starboard, and you're not going to be able to turn to get it to bear. Maybe if you're not sure you're going to be in the correct arc or correct distance, I think an opportunity to potentially all head full and ram a ship out of the way and potentially do some serious damage to it is a great tactic. It's a bit of a Hail Mary though, because you could end up significantly out of position. So it's certainly not something I would do all of the time, but it can be a really, really useful technique. Yeah, to just launch yourself at something, especially if a ship is kind of your ship is kind of damaged already. And if you can angle it right, you can get some good hits on, otherwise you might not be able to. So definitely certainly a tactic that should be considered, but it's a right place, right time kind of tactic. I hope you enjoyed the video, Admirals. If you have any questions on ramming, that sounded a weird sentence to say. Let us know in the comments, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, Admirals. Cheers. Bye.